Okay, lovely humans. Let us take ourselves to the floor, and I would like you to have this evening your usual restorative props, your bolster, your cushions, etc., etc. And I'm going to stay. I know these classes are very often this way, but I'm going to stay really contained, somatic, small movements. Some people might find it tedious. And certainly when I was doing my somatic coaching training, I remember the teacher saying that she had some, like, I don't know if it was an Olympic athlete, but somebody who was a big competing, competitive athlete doing the course. And she kept saying, I love this, but it's so slow. So she was, yeah, both could feel the benefit and also the frustration. And I know that that is there when doing somatics, but I'm going to ask you to trust that it just might be a friend to your body. And we are working this evening. Well, for those of you who do the recording, it may not be the evening when you come to do this. We're working with the body that we have. We were talking before I recorded about just this whole thing about expectation of our body to keep going with the same level of health and with no disruptions, challenges, foibles until we drop dead at 104. And the truth is that if you live in a human body, it's going to start to change and it's aging all the time, and it can't continue without health challenges. Otherwise, we would be immortal. And we talked about menopause being a time where we really meet that in spades, this sense that we have a body that is prey to nature. And nature is life and death cycle. And while this is a huge challenge, it is also, I find personally, a very grounding and humbling texture to my life, or it adds that texture to my life. And kind of makes me feel more human than maybe I did before when I felt kind of like some weird immortal person or immortal creature, because I wasn't considering my mortality. So sit for a moment with connection. You don't have to sit, you can lie, to those considerations, those thoughts. And for some of us, what I've said will be very triggering and maybe a little much. And so I would love you to notice if it's just a bit much for you. Is this a conversation you're not ready and able to have with yourself? And what I would hope for in terms of what you might gain from that conversation with yourself is a little bit of self-compassion. Because the other thing we were talking about before I started recording was the pressure to be in this body and to move through the decades physically fabulously. And what we see on social media anyway, representing positive aging, is not just people who look younger than they are, or people who are glamorous and sexual and social and thriving professionally or whatever, we also see that successful, in air quotes, aging looks like lifting heavy weights at the gym when you're 80, or being able to do really bendy yoga when you're 80. But a huge amount of that ability to look younger than you are, to be vibrant and productive and, energized and, yeah, successful, as it were, or to be bendy at 80, or to lift weights at 80, a lot of that is to do with genetics and whether you were born with a body that already was bendy, that has a biochemical turnover that stimulates muscle growth, that doesn't have any underlying physiological problems that reduce the ability to build muscle. For instance, are your joints fully mobile? If they're not, you're not able to build muscle because your elbows don't bend enough and straighten enough in order to put enough strain and movement in the muscles so they don't build. Do you have disc issues? Do you have pain issues? Do you have all sorts of possibilities that are not that unusual? Or do you have some bigger challenges that are part of the roll of the dice, that stop you feeling that these people represent your future? These strong 80-year-olds at the gym, the bendy ones in the yoga mat, the glamorous ones, the social ones, the entrepreneurs at 75 or whatever. Do they represent who you feel you are or could be? And if not, do they support your sense of being a valuable, valid person in the world? And what would serve you better? Is there something or a way of thinking and being that would serve you better? And for me, having my health challenges and my hearing loss and all of that, my bits and bobs that aren't what they were when they were 20, helps me to connect with other people, to see other people more tenderly, more compassionately, and frankly, to be less self-satisfied. So a big, big, big way to begin a yoga practice. And I offer you for the next wee while that the practice is not about improvement. It's about inhabiting your body as it is and looking for ways to enjoy it on a purely physiological level, just hanging out with your bod, moving it in ways that feel nice. And I'm not even going to talk all the somatic talk about focus on this muscle and the contraction and the lengthening. We're just going to move. What I would recommend, though, is that you breathe deeply. Maybe you'd like to start doing that now. noticing the movement that creates. And then when you're ready, could you find your way onto your back with your knee bent? Not your knee, your two knees, unless you only have one knee. Which to my knowledge, none of you here are without a knee, she said, going off into one of her random weird side tracks. And if you've had to move to get onto your back, reconnect with your breath when you get there. It's very likely you'll have kind of let it go a little bit. Make sure you're going to be warm. And breathe. And feel the movement of the breath, the movement of the body with the breath. And notice if there's anywhere in your body that feels a sense of pleasure, or at the very least, a sense of comfort, sense of functioning fine and feeling grand. Might just be your fingers. You can have your arms resting wherever you'd like them to be. And we begin with arch and flatten. And really just allowing yourself to do this movement for the sake of movement. Inhaling to arch the spine, the pelvis moves towards your feet, rocking towards your tail. So the lower back gets a bigger gap between itself and the floor. And exhaling, the lower back touches the floor. And though I would suggest that you breathe deeply as much as you remember to, allow yourself to move in this way at any speed that you like. And if you find yourself off dreaming about stuff, that's okay. Maybe you're a dreamer. We'll carry on for another half a minute or so. Making sure you're not bringing yourself to pain or anywhere that you feel is unsafe. And then come to stillness and rest in stillness in any position that you like. And then we're going to let the knees drop towards the left. And exhale the knees back to center. We're not doing the head and the arms. This isn't so much wash rag twist, it's just targeting our hips a little. Inhaling the knees to the other side. And exhaling back to center. If this is tricky for your lower back, you might find it better to keep your feet stacked one on top of the other, rather than having the legs in a scissors motion, which will get in more into the front of the hip. But I don't want you to be in discomfort. So optimal for the hips is to have the knees asymmetrical. Probably better for most lower backs is to have the knees and feet together. And after that, anything goes. Looking for the pleasure. And feeling free to go off into a reverie, or to stay very connected to the changing physical experience of this movement. And then slowly coming to stillness in any position that you like. You may want the legs straight or bent. You may want to be lying on your back or maybe roll to a side. And breathe. And then when you're ready, do take your your legs out long, and your heels about mat width apart, and your arms in an echoing position up above. So you're creating a long human X. If that's tricky for your shoulders, the arms can come lower and the elbows can bend. And then reach, if you will, from your core, from your center into your right heel, as if that right leg is going to slide away along the floor, not pointing to the toes, but reaching from the center. And then the same with the left leg, as if it's being pushed out from the center. And the right leg and the left arm, reaching not through the toes and fingers, but through the bones from the hip and shoulder, from the core. And then the left leg and the right arm. And the right leg and the left arm. And once more, the left leg and the right arm. The bones reaching out from the body. And then let everything go very soft, melt everything. And then when you're ready, bring your arms down by your sides or onto your belly, just somewhere where they're a little less useless, as it were. And bring your feet about hips width apart, so the legs are more as if you were standing. This next movement requires some core strength, and you might find it better or easier to have the left knee bent, or you might be fine with the left leg long. That's going to just stay there. And then the right leg is going to slide up in towards your hip, as if you are trying to drill your thigh bone vertically up into your hip socket. And then as you inhale, relax that. As you exhale, imagine drawing those bones up into the hip. You might feel a sort of slide of your right heel horizontally up the mat towards your cheek. And then inhale to relax. You might also, if you put your hand on your right waist, as you draw that leg into the hip, you'll feel maybe a thickening or shortening of the right waist. And inhale, relax. And this time, as you exhale and draw the leg up towards you along the floor, then also lift it up off the floor. This is where you'll probably find you might be easier with the knee bent, the left knee bent. And then lower it slowly down. It's not going all the way up to vertical. And you melt when you land. And we'll just do 5 more if you can, a slight shortening of the leg up and then lifting as you breathe out. And keep the brakes on as the leg goes down. So control that movement with smoothness. And 4 more in your own time. This is one that you probably can't go off into a reverie about because it's a little more difficult, a little more demanding. And if it's triggering any areas of pain or discomfort or issue for you, then do less or don't do it at all. Depending on your breath rate, probably 1 or 2 more. And when you've done your last one, really let everything thoroughly melt and notice the difference between the 2 sides of your body, particularly from the ribs down. And then we'll do the same on the left. So the right leg stays lazy or easy. And the left leg is going to slide up the mat without lifting for a few times first. And inhale, relax. It'll just go back to where it naturally sits. Exhale, that left thigh bone pulls up into the hip, or the hip rises up a little towards the left ribs, so that you feel the left leg is almost like you're trying to appear like you have a left leg shorter than the right. Drawing it up. Exhale. Inhale to relax. And then as you exhale, we draw it up the mat and then elevate. And the elevation can be tiny or up to a bigger diagonal, but not up to vertical. And then slowly lower as you breathe in. Aiming for 5 more and avoiding moving away from any adverse reactions in the body, even in your sensibilities. And though this may be more exertion than the other ones we've done so far, can you see if you can find something pleasurable in this? Probably 2 or 3 more depending on your breath. Great. Try and melt between each one. Melt the leg. That'll really get you to slow down. And when you feel you've finished those 6 in total, let the 2 legs, hips, buttocks, everything go melty, melty, melt. And breathe. And then slide one foot up and bend the knees, slide the other foot up and bend the knees so that you're lying again with your knees bent and feet flat on the floor, but hips width apart. And we'll go back to just that gentle drawing the knees towards the floor on one side, back to center. And this is slower than our wash rag twist. We're inhaling the knees to the side and exhaling them to center. I really enjoy having my hands resting lightly on my abdomen and upper pelvis here, abdomen and hip bones, so that as my knees drop and rise back, I'm getting this lovely effortless touch, this lovely stroking of my belly under my hands. And just allow yourself, if you want to do that, to tune into your touch. Hopefully imbuing it with a quality of compassion and letting go of any judgments that you might be making through your hands of what you feel there. Noticing the sensation. One more on each side, perhaps. If you're having an absolute ball, you can continue for the next half hour if you like. And if you've already had enough, you can stop if you like. And maybe the next time then you're back to center, you stop and you rest with the legs straight or bent, whatever you feel. I really like personally resting with the legs long. Find I can melt a bit more. And then bend your lovely knees. And let's take one foot and then the other off the floor. Hold your kneecaps in your two hands. And as you exhale, let the knees drift towards your chest. You don't need to pull, they're just coming of their own accord. And as you inhale, let the knees drift away. The hands don't have to stay fully gripping, they can slide over the knees a little. And you could even morph as you exhale to bring the knees close and inhale to bring them away. You could even allow those arms, those hands, to explore your legs in gentle touch. And it might be just the simplest thing that the hands stay more or less still and the legs move under the hands. Or it might be that there's bits of your legs that really want a little warmth and care that you decide to take the arms, the hands rather, to the ankles or the calves or the thighs or the hamstrings or anywhere. But the legs are exhaling in and inhaling away. Just another 15 seconds or so. What is your internal chatter? Are there judgments coming in? Or can it just be movement for the sake of movement? Touch for the sake of touch? The next time the knees come in, can you take them a little wider so that you're more like a baby on a rug? And then we're going to do very gentle circles with the knees. That means that they're going away from each other and towards each other rather than keeping the knees and feet together. They're circling in opposite directions. So the circle opens, the knees move away from each other, they circle around and they come together. Doesn't matter which direction you're going in. And I'm tending to keep my hands on my knees to stop myself feeling like I have to do a terribly big circle. But please remember not to draw your knees in with pressure towards your trunk. You want to move in a way that's really easeful for the hips. Change direction if that's okay for your brain and your body. Might be awkward in some way. Relax the jaw and the face. And then when you're ready, take one foot and then the other to the floor and notice how might you melt the legs and hips. Can they melt bent or do you need to straighten them out? Go very soggy. And then take your arms overhead, resting on the floor, and imagine you've just woken up in your big, fabulous king-size bed in your favorite holiday destination. And you want to stretch, yawn, stretch the body, pandiculate the body. And you want to, in doing that, take up as much of the bed as you can. So imagine this great big bed and allow yourself to extend to all corners and edges of the bed through movement, as if you are waking up from the most delicious sleep. And if there is a yawn, yawn. If there is a groan, groan. Anything goes. If there's a hum, a sigh, a song, a tear, a wailing, anything. And over the course of the next little few moments, eventually find your way onto your belly. But take your time. You're still enjoying this extended improvisational pandiculation like the animals we so admire. We sit there watching them moving with such delicious instinctive natures, but we don't allow ourselves that kind of movement so much. No one is watching. And when you do get to your belly, notice if there's anything you need from that position. Is there a particular way you'd like to lie on your belly? Do you need to adjust for more comfortable stuff? Another blanket or anything? And lie as you see fit. And just think your way. When you're ready, rather, I should say, could you adjust so that your legs are neutral? They're both reaching to the bottom of the mat. Rest your forehead in any way you like. Maybe on your hands, or maybe you want to rest your cheek on the floor. And just imagine the fronts of your hips spreading. Quite a difficult thing to do. Imagine that fronts of your hips are like oil spreading over the floor. And then if it's okay for you, bend your right knee and just circle the right leg, the lower leg, in the air from the knee. And what's very tricky about this is to keep that movement smooth. I don't want to get too much into that whole thematic kind of dictation of smooth movement, but just notice how you can move this leg in its most relaxed fashion. And there will be, and this is what I'm hoping for, a rolling of your thigh bone on the floor, which means that there's a rolling in the hip joint. So this is not a knee or foot exercise. This is a hip exercise. Then also, can you allow yourself to enjoy it fairly passively? Change direction if that's not too neurologically awkward. Don't do anything that gives you pain. And then let that leg go. And notice the difference between your left and right hips as you try to relax both hips. Relaxing the front of the hips. You may find that the right hip feels a little more spread. And then bend your left knee, and we do the same. Nice and easy. If you're doing this in the evening, those of you who take the recording, you'll probably sleep well. Not really a morning kind of class, definitely an evening kind of class. Feeling that roll of the thigh bone. As you circle the foot. Changing direction if you're okay with that. Discombobulate you too much. And then let that leg come down and melt both hips. And then when you're ready, tuck your toes and push up onto all fours. And if your knees are able to stay on all fours, that would be great. If they're not, you might need to just rest for this practice because we're going to be, the weight is going to be on the knees. If your wrists don't like being flat on your palms, then take the hands forward or come down to your elbows. And we're going to rock back and forth, just getting a little motion into the shoulders, knees and hips. Depending on your arm position, also a bit of movement into the wrists. Then can you turn that onto a diagonal? So you're swaying to the right hand, the left knee. Obviously all four limbs are on the floor. Just a slight diagonal. And then do the other diagonal, which will initially feel quite confusing. And you might notice that one of those diagonals flows more easily. Certainly my right hip is less free or neutral than my left hip. It's got a few more quirks going on, and so this is a little less flowy on this side for me. But there it is. Just one of those things that causes a little discomfort sometimes lately. And I hope it will improve. But if it doesn't, I'll get some help. And then coming to circle around all those limbs. This is the last thing in this position, if it helps you decide whether you want to rest or just carry on. And if it turns into something else, like an improvised snake in the grass or some kind of dance of the seven veils and isn't suckling anymore, is just some sort of yummy self-led mooching, then that's really fine. Or suckling if you prefer. Maybe purring, maybe sighing, maybe crying, maybe breathing, definitely breathing. And then if your knees and ankles will allow, could you sit back just for a moment? If they don't allow, you might prefer to sit on your bum. We won't be here long. And just letting that movement dissipate in the body. So what I'd like you to just find in your space is either something like a soft scarf, and you would just use maybe one end of it, this kind of size of a little lump. But if you happen to have one of these squishy balls, that would be optimal. So you're trying to emulate in what you're looking for a squishy thing like that's very squishy. And if you do have one of those balls, I'm sorry I didn't say this at the beginning, I forgot that I wanted to use it. If you do have one of those balls, deflate it quite a lot so that it almost looks, when it's hanging around, like it is fully deflated, but when you press it, you can feel there's a teeny bit of air left in it. So it really wants to be very pliable. When you lie on your belly, I'll just show you upright, it's going to go here in front of your right hip, in front of the groin. So I'm going to be resting down on it or on my folded up scarf, not folded, kind of crumpled like this. So I don't know if you can see it, but it's just under there. And I'm basically going to find the position where it is not under the ASIS, the sticky out bone, but in that hollow there, just between the pubic bone, the upper thigh, and the front of the pelvis, where your knicker line would be. And then your job, and this is tricky enough, strangely, is to try and relax that hip and the buttock of that side. Both of them, both sides, and the thigh. And try not to get thrown over to the left. If you're getting thrown over to the left, your ball may be overinflated, or your crumpled up scarf might be a bit too big. And try and mount. Really try and let the legs go, and really, thinking that they're relaxed. And then I focus in and I realize they're just hanging on. Hamstrings are hanging on. And it takes a lot of self-talk to try and allow those tissues to really go almost like they've been anesthetized. I've done this sometimes and found that there was a huge sort of wave of almost tears or sounding of a mixture of relief, release, and almost, I don't know, fear or something of releasing. I'm saying that not to front load your experience, but just in case you're finding it a little emotionally triggering, that would not be great surprise. Melt as best you can. And then as gently as you can with the ball, the thingy under there, bend that knee again and do even smaller circles of the foot, just like we did before. Just feeling that little roll of the thigh bone, the movement of the hip, the spaciousness you're creating. Just checking in with what is being in this body. Take that leg down again and let a little more melt happen. The glutes, hamstring, maybe the lower back melting. And then with minimum disturbance, take the ball out and melt both hips. Notice what you notice. If you want to stay there melting and do nothing, not move at all, stay there if there's stuff still kind of unfurling. But when you're ready, take the ball and put it under the other hip at the front. Just in that hollow between the thigh, the front hip bone, and the pubic bone, and melt again. Give up your weight. And then bending that knee and doing the mini circles. Changing direction if you like or not. And then bringing that foot down and melting a little more. Don't forget to breathe. And notice if any sound is desired or required. Breathing out through the mouth can sometimes be a really nice way of releasing. Certainly helps to relax the jaw. If you're having a ball, stay there. If you're done with minimum disturbance, take it out and melt again. Hooray for melting. Then could you roll onto your left side? And I would recommend that you have some kind of maybe folded blanket or a very low cushion under your head. Most of that cushion is behind you. The left arm is out on the floor. The knees are up in line with the hips. I'm just going to turn off and on my camera because it's gone out of focus. And you need a bit of space behind you. I should have said that, because you're going to end up with your right arm out behind you in a twist. But to begin with, we're going to send our right arm forwards of our forehead. And it's long and straight, that right arm, but the fingers are on the floor. We're going into propeller. Taking that arm slightly higher so it's on a lovely diagonal. Quite relaxed and yet not floppy. And then slide the right leg backwards towards the back edge of your mat, so that the arm and the leg are echoing each other. Now, if you have a danger associated with extending the spine, you can just keep the leg long to the bottom of the mat instead of back behind you. The movement for the leg for propeller is that it will slide forwards, either staying straight, and then it will slide back to where it began, or it can slide forwards, and as it goes, as the body needs to, the knee can bend up towards the tummy, and then the leg will straighten on its journey back. The other detail is that the foot can stay on the floor, stroking the floor, which I find really delicious. Or the foot can hover an inch or so off the floor, which I find I like in the mornings because it's quite muscular, but at night I prefer the slidey, so you get to decide. Leave the leg back there, and the trajectory of the arm that's going to add in is that it strokes the floor above your head and you open out with the back of the head looking, or the face looking to the ceiling, and the right arm on the floor behind you if the shoulder will allow. And the return journey is the same. The arm strokes the floor above the head. But that might not work for your shoulder joints. If it doesn't, then it's better to bring that arm, slide it down to your chest, and then open it out behind you. And we're going to add those two things together. So you're going to inhale as you stroke the arm above the head and slide the foot forward and open out into your twist, where the right leg is pointing forwards to the left and the right arm is resting behind you and your head is to the ceiling. And then you exhale to roll onto your side again, reaching the right leg back and the right leg forward, right arm forward. Continue, and I'm again not going to give all those details of like focusing on the core muscles or anything. We're just going to inhale and exhale and enjoy the sensuality of this movement. Notice what you need for that hip or any other area of your body that's in need of any kind of extra care? And is there any way that you would like to improvise this? Is there something you would change if you decided you were going to invent a movement according to what you want? Might this stay similar but morph a little bit? Could be about reaching through the heel instead of the toes. Could be about rolling around the floor a bit more. Anything and everything is up for grabs. Maybe 2 more breaths, which means 2 more openings, 2 more lines to the side. And the next time that you roll to your back, take your whole body to your back and rest symmetrically and notice what you notice. As you roll to your right side, just make sure you've got enough room behind you and in front of you for the leg to kick forward and reach back. In order to do this on this side, I'm going to have my head elevated just so I don't block my microphone, which is on my right side of my face. But I don't want you to do that yourself. Your head is down on your low cushion or your folded blanket or whatever. Taking the left leg back behind you, reaching for the back edge of your mat, and the left arm up in front of your forward or even a little higher. So you have a lovely long diagonal between those 2 top limbs, the left limbs. The right knee is bent approximately in line with your hip. We don't need to do the practice session here. We can immediately slide the left foot forward, slide the left arm above the head or across the chest, depending on your shoulders, out into that twist. And exhale back onto your side again. And we're looking for the pleasure, the application of choice, and the choice being led by your experience of being in this body right now. My favorite quote from my favorite teacher, Gil Hedley: can we increase our tolerance for pleasure enough to allow our nervous system to move as it was born to move? Two more. stopping sooner if you need to, carrying on longer if you need or want to. And when you open to that second twist, roll all the way onto your back and go neutral and notice what you notice. And as you rest, think about what you want from your restorative pose. So legs up the wall might give you the ability to really let the legs go jelly and to let some of the tissue of the thighs relax and the hips and the buttocks relax. Or reclining cobbler would give you an external rotation of the hips, might feel nice and spacious and give you that sense of, mobility in the hips. And also it will give you a nice little back bend. Or maybe you'd prefer to do a side-lying child's pose because what you'd really like is to cuddle into your center. So I'll demonstrate that one first. That would be lying on something with the head on something that makes it not fall down too much, so the head is fairly neutral. And then hugging the bolster or cushions in at your chest, belly, pelvis. Or you can get your knees up around the bottom of the bolster. But if you do that, you get a bit of a fall down of the feet here, which does funny things to the angle of the sacrum. So it can be nice to put something also, if you can manage it, between the feet. But you also need a blankie to cover you over at the back and the side, maybe even to cover over your face. So that's child lying side pose, side lying child's pose. And I'm sure you're all very familiar with reclining cobbler at this stage, where the top of the bolster is elevated, the bottom of it is lower. You have cushions or blocks for your knees. You have blankies for staying warm. And you sit at the bottom and you lie back and you take the soles of the feet together and then knees onto the cushions. You maybe wrap your body in your blankie, or maybe you put a blanket over your eyes. Your elbows are on the floor, your palms up. And for legs up the wall, it's very important to get your bum real close, so that if you are very far from the wall and legs up the wall like this, the knees will end up locking, and that's not a good idea. So you've got to reverse in, get your bum to touch the wall, put something nice and cozy near the wall so that you're not on bare floor, and get the legs up nice and close so that the legs are really able to slightly bend and they're almost like they're going to fall into you, would be the aim for me anyway, with legs up the wall. Just this deep sense of melt in the muscles of the legs. So whatever you want or need, enjoy the mess you've made, the props you have, the resources we have simply in this gorgeous practice. And just notice where you're at with all of this. Quite a contemplative practice that can bring us deep into a sort of simplicity, a sort of porousness. So you may feel a little bit porous, a little bit like you would soak up the insults of life if someone was to come into the room and be mean, that it would just feel much more of a and assault them at other times. So go gently with yourself after a practice like this and after the thoughts that I asked you to contemplate at the beginning. It might help you to notice what feels good in your body right now. What I'd like to suggest to you for the next couple of minutes is that you make some sound with your breath. It could simply be Ujjayi breathing, where you imagine that you're trying to fog up a mirror while you breathe, but you do so with the lips lightly closed so that the sound that you hear is quite internal. The jaw is relaxed and there's a big oral cavity, big space inside your mouth. So it should sound in your own head like wind in the trees. It's like a but with the lips closed. HA sound, but with the lips closed. Or if you feel it can be slightly awkward when you're lying flat on your back, but if you're in reclining cobbler or lying on your side, you could spend 2 minutes humming. I'm not going to hum because I know that through Zoom you tend to hear the beginning of the hum or a song or a singing, but it sort of cuts out and is a bit strange. But if you felt like humming on your out breath at whatever note makes you feel the most resonance or vibration in the body. And I would recommend, if you feel comfortable to do so, that you choose the humming because it's going to be just a little more impactful than Ujjayi. 2 minutes, some sort of sound. That's 2 minutes. You're welcome to continue or let that go. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. You're welcome to stay as you are. I highly recommend that you do, melting a little more, taking your time when you do come back to the world, moving a little, connecting to your center before you get on with your time. And just be tender with yourself as you meet yourself or other people, as you take yourself to the next part of your day. And please do get in touch if you struggled with any of the content this evening and need a little holding. May you be well. May you be free from harm. May you progress where possible. May you find ways to sit at ease with the rest. May all beings know peace. Om Shanti, Namaste. Rest well and take care. Bye-bye. See you soon.